Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello and welcome to Meet the Grantmakers online. My name is Angela Richardson, and I am a senior trainer at the Grantsmanship Center, and we are located in Los Angeles. What we do is we provide training and resources to help nonprofits and organizations get funded and create change in your communities. If you've joined us before, welcome back. If this is your first time coming to a Meet the Grantmakers panel, welcome. We're so happy to have you. This Meet the Grantmakers event happens quarterly, and it's a collaboration between the Grantsmanship Center, Foundant Technologies, and Grant Station. So we thank our partners for providing this together, and I hope you all will enjoy. So each time we get together, we have an illustrious group of panelists, which I will introduce you to in a moment. I'm very excited to do so. But before we get there, let me give you some logistics. So today, you will notice that we are recording today's event, which we do every time. That's so this panel can be available to you afterwards. So if you haven't seen some of the other ones, definitely go back and take a look. There's some really good ones. So the recording will be available to everyone who registered. So you will get it, as well as it will be posted in the months to come. In addition, closed captioning is available. So if you go down at the little toolbar at the very, very bottom, you can click it on so that you can have your closed captioning available. Or if it's on and you want to turn it off, feel free to do so. When you registered, you were invited to submit some questions. So I'm going to be taking some questions from those of you that submitted in advance, as well as we're going to be taking live questions as well. So down there at the toolbar, you'll see a little Q&A. So if you have a question as we're going through the panel, starting even now, go ahead and put your questions down in there. We have a facilitator who's helping me to answer the questions, as well as we'll bring some live ones forward for the panelists. So think about your questions. We won't get to every one of them, but we'll get to just as many as we possibly can. So now it's my great honor to introduce the panelists that we have here today. So starting with Mark Johnson. Mark is the executive director from the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council. They're located in St. Paul, Minnesota. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Nice to be here.
And then next we have Jackie Lendsey. Jackie is the interim president and CEO of the Washington Area Women's Foundation in Washington, D.C., one of my favorite places to visit. Thank you for being here, Jackie.
Thank you.
And then last but certainly not least, we have Jeff Yost, who is the president and CEO of the Nebraska Community Foundation, and they're located in Lincoln, Nebraska. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for being here.
Good day. Nice to be here.
Yes. So all of their profiles, you all would have received them in your email. So make sure that you look at their profiles, look at what they fund, their guidelines are there. Today, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about their specific foundations, what makes them unique. And just a heads up, they don't fund across the nation for everyone. So they might not fund exactly what you do, but you can still learn from their approach, how they view this process. And you can, of course, check out some of the other recordings to see how other funders view some of these same kinds of questions. So with that, we're going to get started. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists, starting with Mark, to just take a few moments, 3 to 5 minutes, to just introduce your foundation, your organization to the group, letting us know how you fund, what makes you different. What I noticed from all of our panelists is that each of you is so different, and what you do is so different. So Mark, I'm looking forward to learning more about yours.
Thanks, Angela. Again, my name is Mark Johnson. I'm the executive director of the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council in Minnesota. And the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council is an arm or an entity within the legislature here in Minnesota. So the council that I work for actually was statutorily produced by the legislature, because back in 2008, when we were in a recession, the voters of Minnesota passed an extra 0.3% sales tax upon ourselves here in Minnesota. And 1/3 of that money goes into what's called the Outdoor Heritage Account, which is the account that the Lessard-Sams Council makes recommendations each year to the legislature for how to fund or what projects to use those dollars for funding. Interestingly, that 1/3 of 1% sales tax, or yeah, I guess it's a third, 1/8. I'm sorry, with 1/3 of the 3/8. So that 1/8 of 1% comes to well over $100 million each year. And in this case, the dollars are to be used for habitat here in Minnesota to protect, restore, and enhance habitat for fish, game, and wildlife. So there's a lot of applications within that, whether you're metro or rural or urban areas, whatever it might be. But it's quite unique across the United States. There are a few other states that have similar programs and similar tax dollars or funding dollars. But I think actually Minnesota is now the largest. This year, I think our funding this year was $171 million that is just being signed today. It's being finally passed in the Senate, and it'll be signed into law when it goes. So an interesting process I've loved being involved with because there's so much cool stuff that happens. So there you go. And I should say, we have an open, our call for funding requests is open right now through May 26th, I believe it is. If you go on my profile and click on the logo, it would take you to our website, and you'll see that call in red font in the lower left of the webpage. So please feel free to check us out if you'd like.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Next, I'll ask Jackie to please introduce yourself and your foundation.
So I'm Jackie Lendsey with and I'm interim president and CEO of the Washington Area Women's Foundation. The Washington Area Women's Foundation was started it started 25 years ago. So we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. And we were started by a group of women, our founding mothers, who wanted to focus on issues around women and girls in our community. And so 15 years later, we've granted 25 years later, we've granted $15 million in grants to organizations, and we fund in the Washington metropolitan region. So in the District of Columbia, in Prince George's and Montgomery County in Maryland, and in Northern Virginia. We also we don't take unsolicited requests for funding. We fund around specific areas. And right now our areas are around early care and education. We have a funders collaborative. It consists of 11 members of corporate and foundation organizations who have come together to support advocacy and direct service when it comes to early care and education. And they support those programs, and we've been doing this for about 15 years now. And then our other grant making area right now is our Young Women's Initiative, which is a part of a national initiative that is going on across the country with 8 other women's foundations around the country, where we are focusing on developing the next generation of advocates in our community, especially in the District of Columbia, and also developing the next generation of entrepreneurs. So we give $2,000 grants to what we call our rock stars, who are young women between the ages of 14 and 21 who have an entrepreneurial idea to get started, and we give them those $2,000 grants to move that idea along. So again, we don't accept unsolicited proposals, but we are funding in those 2 areas. We've also funded around during the period of COVID, we funded around safety, funding organizations that work in the area of services for women and girls who are experiencing sexual or domestic violence. So I'm really happy to be here and excited about the conversation.
Thank you. And Jeff?
Hi, my name is Jeff Yost. I'm the president and CEO of the Nebraska Community Foundation. I just celebrated my 25th anniversary here, so I've been here most of my professional life. Yeah. We do community economic development work throughout the state of Nebraska. So we work in about 275 communities, primarily rural communities throughout Nebraska, to really help them become communities of choice. One of the fascinating things that's happened post-pandemic, and certainly during the pandemic, many terrible things. One of the small silver linings was we really did have proof of concept that you can live and work wherever you want to live and work. So the community economic development question really changed from one of jobs to one of place. Why do I want to live and work and raise my family in this community? Which fits very, very nicely with community building and community philanthropy in particular. So we help communities to set up a community-based affiliated fund to help them raise money from their own assets. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, but really to mobilize the abundance they have in their place to become those communities of choice. So there's about 250 affiliated funds within the NCF network. The process we use is called asset-based community development. So it's not based upon more your needs, your dependency, your deficiencies. It's really trying to help people understand what's all the goodness in this particular place. What are the assets in this particular place? How do we mobilize the people and all the other forms of capital in our community to become communities of choice? So one of the things we've done through the Nebraska Community Foundation over the years is we've studied what's called the intergenerational transfer of wealth. And for Nebraska is about 1.9 million people. We just finished a study in 2021. We think $100 billion is transferring from one generation to the next in the next 10 years in this state of less than 2 million people. So in many, many counties we work in, the transfer of wealth is between $1 and $5 billion in the next decade. Part of it is really trying to help people think about the abundance that is that exists in our place. And the Nebraska Community Foundation has used that sort of thinking for a long time. So these affiliated funds we've had in the history of the foundation, which is about 30 years now, we've now reinvested about $480 million in Nebraska communities for everything from early childhood development to aging in place to economic and leadership development, youth engagement, K-12 education, all the other things that make communities of choice. And then the other piece of it is the Nebraska Community Foundation itself is not a grant maker. All of our grant making is done by these community volunteers in these places, because the only people that can build community are the people that live and work in them. So we're constantly working to try to push power out the door to where it needs to be, which is as localized as possible.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm very interested in the model of hearing about how you do that. So I think it's one thing that makes your community foundation different from other community foundations. So I'm looking forward to hearing and learning more about that. Okay, so we're going to turn to the time of the panel where we're going to start taking some questions. So I'm going to start with the questions that we have that were submitted, and I see questions are coming in. This first question, Mark, I'm going to start with you again. And Jeff, you just sort of alluded to this, as did Jackie. One of the first questions that came in from Amy was about this post-COVID environment and how either your funding priorities or your approach to grant making or your organizational infrastructure has been impacted or affected. And that can be, I think, either in terms of shifts or, as Jeff said, the silver linings. So I just want to give each of you an opportunity, as we're all, I think, doing, reflecting both organizationally as well as grant makers on what has changed for us. What have we let go of? What have we started? How have we expanded? So however you'd like to take that. And Mark, I'll start with you.
Sure. Interesting question. Good question for these times. From a priority standpoint, the priorities that we have stayed the same. And it's because of the rigidity of our funds. They're constitutionally dedicated, so, and as well as statutorily dedicated here in Minnesota. But the expectations, I think we've seen a shift in expectations twice now. As we got into COVID, it was tougher for people to get their work done. You couldn't get work. If you had a work group going onto a construction site or a habitat site to do work, before you could put 12 people in a van and send them out. During COVID, it got so you had to have 12 vehicles they wanted separation of people. So it changed the expectations. We knew that work would slow down. We knew overhead costs would go up because of that. Since then, for this last year, things have changed quite a ways back toward normal. And that being that now the expectations are that we're getting back to normal, and the expected time frames of getting work done should be back to normal as well. It's a little bit of a shift for some to be able to kick that back into gear, because some of the other factors have come in where we have a lot more people working remote. That's provided some efficiencies in many ways and challenges in another, but somehow it's all starts to seem to work together right now pretty well. So those efficiencies are panning each other out, and work is getting done quicker.
Thank you. Jackie?
I was going to say, for us, when COVID hit, we actually recognized an opportunity to be supportive to many of the organizations that we have worked with and given grants to in the past. So we started specifically our Stand Together Fund, and that Stand Together Fund was designed to provide general operating dollars to grantees. And we did that in a couple of ways, but one of them was through our safety grants, because we knew that the vulnerability of young women and girls who were experiencing sexual and domestic violence was increased during that period, during the pandemic, when everyone was back, was not going to work, or was situated in a particular home or wherever they lived, or in a shelter. And many of them were in those areas of sexual and domestic violence were actually now with the person who might be the perpetrator. And so we wanted to make sure that those organizations that we worked with, or organizations that were working with individuals in that situation, had general operating dollars. So they didn't have to ask us, or they didn't have to do anything specific, but those dollars were used especially for those programs. Coming out of COVID, we did not fund those safety grants this past year, and in fact stuck with our early care and education grants and with our young women's grants. And so coming out of COVID, we're doing what everyone else is doing, looking at what is the reality of the world at this point? What's the reality of what's happening in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region? And then where will our dollars be best used? But during COVID, we specifically did have a fund that provided general operating dollars to organizations in that very specific way. And I'd add to that, we were just like anyone else, and any of the other funders and businesses in the area who support organizations. We ended up being totally remote ourselves, and decided as a result of that, our lease was ending. And so we decided, we don't need to do that anymore. We can be totally remote. So our organization gave up, ended our lease, and our staff is totally remote. And in a variety of ways, but in a very specific way, that gave us more money to give out to our grantees.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Jeff, I know you touched on it already, but would you like to add some more things?
Yeah, happy to. I think there's three big pieces coming out of COVID that we're trying to pay really close attention to. One is workforce development, and especially availability of workforce. So again, Nebraska is about 1.9 million people. Depending upon the estimates, we're right now between 60 and 80,000 people short. So we have that many jobs that are unfilled and an unemployment rate of less than 3%. So we really have a people attraction issue in trying to attract people into the workforce. That's one big piece. A second big piece is associated with helping people to move out of isolation. And we've become a society that's more and more isolated in the last several years anyway. And there was a CDC report that just came out on this last week. So a tremendous amount of our work is focused on welcoming and belonging within the context of returners, newcomers, and current residents. So how do you really help people become engaged in their community, getting over this sense of isolation? Because again, communities can only be built by the people that live and work in them. And then the third is this whole issue of, with proof of concept of remote work that Jackie was just giving us a wonderful testimony to, how do we continue to be really opportunistic and help people dream bigger dreams of why remote workers might want to be in this particular place? Maybe it creates the opportunity for a young family to raise their kids near one of their parents as opposed to being hundreds of miles away from grandparents. So just continuing those iterations of, as the economy has changed, and certainly COVID changed lots of things within our economy as well. What are the challenges associated with that? But again, what are the opportunities, and continuing to be opportunistic about trying to help people experiment with what might be next.
Thank you. I'm really appreciating the just naming the isolation over the last several years and how we all come back out. I know certainly that we contend with that inside of the training with organizations, like how do they even bring people back to services? So I think that I'm really appreciating that your foundation is looking at that, and other organizations as well. I feel like that's a very big thing, both organizationally as well as in the communities that we serve. So we're gonna switch reels a little bit and start talking. I'm gonna put together a couple of questions that have come in. This one is about communicating with funders, and I'm gonna ask it slightly different because each of you are a little bit different context. So one question that's coming in, and Jackie, this one I'm gonna start with you for this one. This one's coming in from Kara. It's a combination of Kara's question and a woman named Sarah who wrote in, and they're very curious about foundations that do not accept unsolicited grant proposals, but obviously they're funding grant proposals. So what is the best way, or are there ways to talk with grant makers, communicate, get your projects in front of not just your foundation, but other, in general, foundations that do not accept unsolicited grants? So that's going to be kind of for you. And then for Mark and for Jeff, I'm going to ask you a more general question of what are some of the best preferred ways to be approached by prospective grantees? What is your preferred method of communications, tips that you have for the viewers, et cetera? So Jackie, I'll start with you, and then Jeff.
Well, great question. And obviously, when a foundation doesn't accept unsolicited grants, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are not ways to communicate with that foundation. In fact, one of the things that we do, and one of the things I know, is we have other ways in which individuals or organizations who are looking for support can join us. We do an Ask Her series on a monthly basis that brings key funders or key policymakers together for a conversation around key issues in our community. And anyone can join those conversations, and anyone can become a part of our mailing list and receive information. Because it's not that we don't accept unsolicited proposals, but it's not that we don't meet with individuals, that we don't take meetings with organizations that are interested or who would like to be considered at some point in the future. The other thing that I would say about that is we also are really good at listening to what's going on in our community. And that helps us as we look towards where the areas of funding need to be going forward in the future. So it's not necessarily that we're not working in a particular area now, but with enough information and with enough input from other organizations, it may become an area of interest for us in the future, and one in which we will fund. But I would say reach out. I would say make sure you connect to any public sessions that they do, like this one, and all foundations do, like our Ask Her series. I would say show up at their events, or show up in places where those funders may be. Introduce yourself. Talk about what you're doing. No funder is going to turn down an opportunity to talk with you. It may be in the end that it doesn't fit within their funding areas, but it still does not hurt to reach out and to figure out what may be available. I will say that it helps also because there may be times when a funder will support something that you're doing that fits a specific need. So I'll give you an example. An organization may be doing a search for their next CEO. I do know of funders who may not have that as their major funding area, and they don't solicit proposals in that area. But if they know an organization or they're working with an organization, they may help support that to keep that organization going under what they might call capacity building, or because they do have additional funds from a donor who says, I want to support in a particular area, and they're willing to do that. So again, I would say communicate, meet, greet, attend public events that the foundation is holding. And at some point in the future, you never know, but there may be an opportunity for you to either participate in their proposal round or to make the request or to make an ask for unsolicited funds to do a specific project.
Thank you. I think, I know this comes up oftentimes in our trainings too, and I'm really appreciating what you're sharing, because I think there's a misunderstanding that if a grant maker says that they don't accept unsolicited grant proposals, there's the perception that it's like the gates have closed and locked and nobody can get in and there's no accessibility. But grant makers choose that approach for different reasons. So what I'm hearing you say is that that's not what it means, which is oftentimes what I find the case, but there you can still reach out and communicate and attend things and see if it's a good match.
Yeah, I can't speak for all foundations, but I can speak for ours. And that's not what it means. It just means that at this particular point in time, we are funding in specific areas. But please reach out. You want a conversation with our program officers, have that conversation. You want a conversation with me, have that conversation. We are community oriented and community minded, and we're not going to pass up an opportunity to figure out some way that we can't support. If we can't do it, we'll send you to someone else who can.
Jackie, I'm going to ask you one follow-up question to that, and then I'll go on to our other panelists. So let's say an organization reaches out to have a conversation with the program officer or yourself. What are some ways that you think that they could prepare best in order to be ready for those conversations?
Research, research, research. If you haven't researched the foundation, if you haven't looked at their website to understand clearly what they do, then you're not going into the conversation with your best foot forward. So research, research, research. I would also say that research includes talking to anyone else in your community who knows the foundation, or who may know the program officer, or who may know someone in the foundation that you might begin to have that conversation with and see if there's any interest. But I would say research, research, research. Our websites are there to give you as much information as possible, and then find other information from key people in the community who may know the foundation and its leaders. And it doesn't help if you happen to know a board member.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So Jeff, I'm going to move on to you. And I know that your context is a little different because you don't do direct grant making. So I'm not sure how that grantee conversation and communication works for you all.
Well, we end up having lots of these conversations, and I think of my work much more as a connector and facilitator. Mm-hmm. And I think most grant makers think of themselves in this way. I mean, most grant makers don't want to have a power over relationship. They want to have a power with relationship. So I think the with context is incredibly important. One of the things we talk about in the Nebraska Community Foundation frequently is that we believe change happens along the lines of trust. Change happens along the lines of relationships at the speed of trust. We're just inundated with ideas these days. Most ideas only get adopted because someone you know and trust is encouraging you or helping you to learn about that and embrace that. And so much of philanthropy in particular is about investing in what's next. So taking the time to try to build those relationships, open those doors, and encouraging grant makers to try to do the same thing. I mean, there really is no such thing as being purely objective in these processes. We are absolutely investing in good ideas and good organizations, but we're primarily investing in good people. And when you have good people, when you've had the opportunity to get to know them. The other thing I would say about most of this is we're big fans of walking before we run. So there's lots of sort of incremental steps that we want to go through. There may be elements where you're investing in some capacity building stuff in order to sort of get to the next level of readiness. So building out those relationships, again, if it's through one of our affiliated funds, if it's through a particular donor, but we're facilitating and connecting lots of that. And most of it has to do with authenticity, trust, and hard work. So just figuring out who are those people that you can partner with and really trust to get good work done. This is how we change the world. And we just need to keep working on this whole idea that grantors aren't up here and grantees are down here. but we're all on a level playing field, trying to improve the human lot. And how do we have those with conversations and those with relationships?
Hmm. And just as a follow-up, can you think of, from your experience, maybe a moment when you saw an organization, maybe someone that you've connected, exude, like, let's say the word trust. I think that that's a really big thing. Grant makers and their grantees building like that rapport and that trust, because essentially as an organization, I'm saying to a grant maker, I would like a grant for, $50,000 or whatever it is to do this proposed idea, not knowing that variables come up. So from your experience, have you seen an example where an organization did that exceptionally well, or some tips that you could share with the viewers about how one goes about, or one example, how one might go about building that with a grant maker?
So the vast majority of people that we work with are community volunteers. So they're doing this work out of the goodness of their hearts, and they have other things that they're responsible for, including their jobs and their families. And helping volunteers in particular build up enough of a level of trust to be honest. The honesty is where I see the breakthroughs. Mm-hmm. Because if you just put on kind of a dog and pony show for whoever's going to be that funder, funders have been on lots of these. Mm-hmm. And it usually doesn't work out that well. So obviously you want to lead and share what your dream is and what's the abundance you're trying to mobilize, because funders want to be in the business of leveraging existing investments, but also being really honest and authentic about, these are the assets we're bringing to the table, but these are also the challenges or barriers that we're encountering. And just being willing to be honest and authentic without, and it's really a balancing act, being honest and authentic about all of these things without expressing a sense of dependency. Mm. Because funders aren't interested in creating a greater sense of dependency with their money. Many, many funders have experienced this over time. Funders are primarily trying to help people become more independent, more self-sufficient, so they can really work on their mission. So really finding that balance and having enough kind of integrity and authenticity to share what the actual circumstances are and what the money is really going to help you break through to be able to go further faster. Was that responsive?
That's so helpful. I want to kind of put some pinpoints in some things, because this question, I think you just shared a lot of really great things that I want to make sure our viewers are noting, because I think, similarly, there's this idea that we have to only show funders the good things, and that it is like a you call it a dog and pony show, that it is like that. So you use kind of like smoke and mirrors and only put forward the good things and try to stuff other things under the carpet. Just, like, let's say something like, leadership changes, or, maybe not implementing the program in the way that you thought you were supposed to, or said that you would. So what I really hear you saying is that part of what we refer to as grantsmanship, which is being a good steward of funding, among the things, being a good steward of money, is bringing that level of honesty to the grant makers. It's a relationship. And the other thing that I heard you say, which I thought was really profound, leveraging your existing efforts, like every organization brings something, and then being honest about the challenges and barriers that you're having. I think that's what makes this organization grant maker relationship long lasting, without dependency, of course.
Absolutely. If I may say one more thing, Angela.
Absolutely.
Incremental information and incremental sharing is really important. And I've found over the years that grant makers, and I've found that personally, I appreciate this too, as opposed to just, we got the money, we're going to get a final report in 3 years. Transparency and communication builds trust. You don't want to overwhelm people with constant information, but incrementally sharing information of, here's a really great thing that happened, or here's something we're struggling with and how we're planning to adapt and evolve. but just constantly kind of incrementally sharing information, dripping information. It really helps grant makers to know what you're doing and to really have a good sense of your capacity to work on your mission.
Yeah, great. So thank you so much for that. I really am appreciating that. So many very within this kind of larger conversation that we're having, there's so many really practical tips that each of you are providing. So I'm appreciating us conversating on both of those levels. Mark, I'm going to move over to you. We're in the conversation around best ways to communicate with grant makers. What are some of the preferred ways that your organization has?
All right. A couple of unique things, I guess maybe they're unique for us. We're really fortunate that we have an online interactive system for applicants to put in their application on, and for them to actually provide it to us if they want us to do a test run or to look it over for them and get feedback. I think that comes back to exactly what Jacquelyn and Jeff were saying, that it's all about communication. It's about reaching out to the grant makers so that we can reach back to you. Even though we have outreach of our own, we don't reach everybody. And we can't, we don't know what the questions are in people's minds. So when you contact us, that's really important year round. We all have our jobs. The grant making organizations are always busy, and I've been involved with a few. They're always busy, but they've always got some time, and they're always willing to answer questions. If they aren't willing to answer questions, they're probably not worth asking money from. I remember being on the other side of the table and thinking, man, if I could only talk to, or if I could only find out how to get money out of the Blandon Foundation, or the Ford Foundation, or the Mellon Foundation, whoever it might be, thinking that they're all these stuffy, closed door, grant making organizations generally are not like that. Mm-hmm. Generally, they're open. They want you to contact them. They want you to ask questions. They want you to seek their help, or at least their guidance in how to put in requests for your needs. And like Jackie said, when people come to us and ask about a project or proposal that they might be thinking about, and it doesn't fit here, we try to lead them to the right funding source or to several different funding sources that might work for them. The other thing is that we often find that when people call with an idea, or they say, can we just discuss something about this? It may be that idea doesn't work, but there's something else they need, a different need they have, or a different proposal they have that fits in beautifully. And all of a sudden you've created a friendship because, and a new line of communication and some hope for that individual that, wow, there's something that can happen here. So, boy, those two, they gave you the information, and I'm just echoing their words.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. So I'm noticing that some of the questions that are coming in, it seems that there's a number of newer organizations, grassroots organizations that are on our call today. And so, I won't read all of them, but what I'm sort of kind of gleaning from some of their comments is like, this is really great, but like, where's how do we get the money? Like, how do we grow our capacity? And, we're balancing so many things. Like, how can you help us move forward? And I just am really appreciating that, because I think all of you probably work in communities where, there are so many people that are doing the work by pure passion and heart, and they're addressing some of the challenges that our communities face, or the environment is facing. So I'm really appreciating that. And I want to say to those individuals, newer organizations, grassroots organizations, there are tips in here. So there's no magic wand that says, and here's how you make more time to apply to grant makers. It takes time. But one of the things I want to lift up that all of you are saying is you don't have to do it alone. That you can reach, each of you has said, here's how you reach out. Here's how you communicate. Here's how you get support for your applications, for moving forward. Even if you don't get it from that grant maker, we will refer you to somewhere or a resource where you can get more help. So I want to lift that up for grassroots organizations that seems like there's a number of them that are struggling with capacity building and sustaining your organizations and your efforts. So with that, I'm going to, Jeff, I'm going to turn towards you. There's something that you said that also has me thinking about this capacity and sustainability, which I really get that from the work that you all are doing. So I want to start a conversation around how, from your perspective, organizations, how we can talk about sustainability in a realistic way. And when we say sustainability as it relates to writing grants, you said something about grant makers are looking to reduce dependency and lift up independency, which speaks to future support and sustainability and building out financial capacity. So I wonder if you'd be willing to, say a little bit more about how your foundation or your affiliates view sustainability for an organization that's growing.
So I think I'll break it into three chunks, if I might. The
Sure.
first has to do with governance. Lots and lots of organizations don't spend very much time on building, sustaining, and engaging a really high-performing board. And what I've found over the years is it's absolutely some of the best time I've ever spent. And I continue to spend lots and lots of time on board development and governance, because those people and their passion, it's one of the most important elements of sustainability, both in terms of those folks giving their time, talent, treasure, and talk, and speaking with others who might be similarly willing to do this. I mean, most nonprofit organizations, grant seeking is only a small portion of their budget. So grant seeking is usually this thing that's sort of above and beyond what we're doing. But to really build out sustainability and a long-term operating plan, there's got to be a stream of revenue. And in most of these places, that stream of revenue is probably within the context of your place and your region, not external. So spending lots and lots of time figuring out who those board members are and having really high expectations of those people. So we have a job description. We actually have a one-page criteria that talks with board members about must-haves, wouldn't it be nice, and not in a million years. I mean, it's really candid language about behavioral criteria for board members. And on average, our statewide board members probably spend a day a month on the Nebraska Community Foundation. This is a big commitment from people. And I think if, and you want to recruit people that are really committed. You don't want somebody who's on 15 other boards. You want somebody who this is one of their 2 or 3 top priorities to help you build and sustain your organization. The second piece is really focusing in on what's mission fulfillment. And mission fulfillment is much greater than just fiduciary care. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term generativity, but generativity is basically a relationship where the person giving has no expectation of remuneration. They're just paying it forward. So an adult having a mentoring relationship with a young person, that's like a typical generative relationship, right? You're just trying to pay it forward. That's what all of us are trying to do in our non-governmental organizations and our community benefit organizations, is figure out ways to make the world better. We're just not trying to, just spin in place. So within that governance piece, building out that organizational capacity where you really can work from fiduciary care, which isn't mission fulfillment, that's just the basics of keeping your doors open, to really working on what are those strategic imperatives, which is a program of work. But then the top of the pyramid is really working on generative stuff. And one of the words we use in the Nebraska Community Foundation consistently is dreams. This is when people are talking about what could be and co-creating the future together. That's the sort of stuff that really, really intrigues donors, when you can get to that point where this is the stuff where we can change the future of this life. We can change the future of this issue. We can change the future of this community. So really thinking in much, much grander terms around mission fulfillment than just sort of meeting your operating needs year to year.
Mm.
And the third is really being willing to have a very transparent and flat organization.
Mm.
So many organizations continue to sort of run in kind of a great man theory context, which is very sort of 1970s S&P 500, the CEO knows all. We now live in an era where information is ubiquitous. Anybody can go out and get the information. So leadership within these organizations is all about engaging people and asking them what's their passion, what they want to contribute, what are the things you can bring to the table, and really facilitating that group of people moving this mission forward together.
Mm.
So those are, I think, three things that I would share as it relates to what are the kinds of things that philanthropy might help you build within your organization. And if you're really willing to invest in those building blocks, you're probably going to go a whole lot further, a whole lot faster than just sort of trying to begin to build out some relationships that if we get this money, we can hang on another year. That's just not, it's not where we're at in 2023.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. So the person who asked the question, are there any models for balancing time and commitments in our circumstances? I think you laid out a very beautiful model. So I'm glad this is recorded so that that person can build that, you integrate that. So thank you. Mark, come to you next.
Yeah, could you reiterate that question?
Yes, I know. It's a question. The question is about sustainability. The question is actually some suggestions for talking about sustainability in a grant request. What are grant makers looking for when discussing this for our programs and organizations? And I kind of launched into it, addressing capacity building for grassroots. So either of those that you might want to speak into is the topic on the table.
You know, Jeff hit an awful lot of it. In fact, the majority of it. From our standpoint, of course, these are state dollars. They're tax dollars of citizens. So everything that's done with them, there has to be extreme transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And along with that, there has to be measurable outputs. And this is for all, I think for all grants that I've ever been involved with, you're looking at measurable outputs, but also measurable outcomes. And I'll give you an example of that. In our case, when we're looking at habitat, output would be like we enhanced or restored 2,000 acres of prairie, 147 miles of stream bank, or 12 miles of shoreline along lakes. Those are the outputs. It's the measurable quantities. The outcomes, the measurable outcomes is, because of that, how many more fish are there? Or how much more opportunity is there for people to enjoy that lake shore? Or how many more species of endangered, how many more endangered or species of special concern are able to survive on that restored prairie? So it's the secondaries, so to speak, but it's really what we're always driving at. Without the outputs, you don't have the outcomes. Mm-hmm. Without the outcomes, the outputs don't mean anything except this is what the money went to spend. So in a way, it's helping to tell your story. It's helping to help others to envision the dream, not just how it takes place, but what's happening now that it's done, and how is it going to expand. From my time in looking at grants in the past, other than this, previous to this experience, it was the same way, whether it was with a small community foundation or whether it was with sports organization or whatever. It was, where's the money going to go? How's it going to be used well? Mm-hmm. And what are those outcomes going to be from it? And then along with that, you mentioned sustainability. In the future, is what you're doing or what you're looking to do going to have some natural ability to sustain by encouraging other people to be involved or by drawing other people to the program or something of that nature?
Yeah, no, very super helpful. What you're sharing here, Mark, because that last piece was that sustainability isn't just about the financial piece. It's about will there be like a need, or will people continue to come to it? So thank you for bringing that up.
If I may, Angela,
Sure.
one last thing, which I'd be remiss not to mention, and that's collaboration. Sustainability always is more attainable with collaboration. So if there's a buy-in by the community, if there are other collaborative sources that provide leverage, or in funding, or be it volunteer, in other words, in-kind contribution, all of those are really important. And make sure that as you keep track of your grants or keep track of your activities, you log those in-kind contributions, and you log those other leverages, because those are really important to the grantor.
Oh, that's a great tip. I hope all of you guys heard that. Log your in-kind donations, because it's important to the grantor. And one last thing I just want to lift up that you shared, Mark, which is the importance of outcomes and outputs. I know that as a trainer, that's something that we just iterate over and over and over again. It's, participants really struggle with the difference and why it's important. And some programs, how do you demonstrate it? But from your very succinct description, it really helped to put on the table, like what are the differences and why they're so important in terms of the programs that we're implementing, not just how to satisfy a question, but the programs and what you want to do, the change you're trying to make. So my shameless plug is, if you still need more help with that, that's what our training does. Jackie, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you here, because you work with grassroots organizations, you work with smaller or grantees rather. So capacity building or sustainability, or a combination thereof.
I like what both Jeff and Mark said, and I'd also say it's about community, and it's definitely about collaboration, and it's also about making sure that your sources of funding are varied, so that you're not finding yourself depending on any one entity, any one foundation, or any one group. And then I'd also say it's about impact. You talked about outcomes. It's about impact. It's about communicating what your work has done to benefit the community that you're in, or what your work has done and what those outcomes look like for individuals, or for the environment, or for the overall community. But collaboration is important, and I call it impact. I say impact is really important. And I also say, I'd like to see organizations that are demonstrating their sustainability by also advocating for the issues that are important to the work they do. And sometimes that advocating gets more attention and light on you as an organization, and brings other funders to the table. We work with a variety of our partners who are advocating on very serious issues, and we get involved in helping them move those issues along. But I think that's also important for sustainability, advocating for your organization, and advocating and working closely in the community with other organizations that are doing similar work, or who can expand the work that you're doing. I don't know if I can offer much more than what Jeff and Mark said, other than I'd use the word impact and advocacy.
I love that. Thank you for bringing advocacy into the sustainability question. Is like advocate, because what you said about as you advocate, or we say in our trainings, if you're educating or sharing information, that's another way to get attention on the efforts that you're doing. So it's not separate from building the capacity of your organizations. It's a part of it. So thank you for lifting that up. We are almost at the top of the hour already, which these hours go by so fast. I do want to get this last question in, which is, I think it's a short answer, but we've been talking about, here's all the things to do. Here's all the things to do. Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that you could advise applicants to avoid? Maybe it's even a pet peeve of your, or something you see constantly. So Jackie, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll just go around, and then we'll do closing comments.
I don't necessarily like to call it mistakes or pet peeves. I mean, we all understand how many, for us at least, to how small some of the organizations are. But spell check, reading your proposal over, making sure the budget really does add up to what you requested. I mean, we're a small organization, so we don't have a huge program staff, but that makes a difference when you're reading a proposal. If the proposal doesn't have anything to do with what you put forward as the funder, or if a person or if an organization really hasn't gone back and reviewed it. And then I'd also say it's important to, we want you to answer every question, but we certainly want you to add an element of what's your spice, and there are lots of ways to get that into. You look at proposal applications and you think, oh my God, this is the driest thing in the world, and I've got to answer this question this way and that way. I think the other thing is trying to figure out how you can convey and communicate what you do and why it's so important to the community. And there's a place for that. There's definitely a place for that in the proposal. But if I say nothing else, it is checking and rechecking and checking before you submit that proposal, before you hit that online on the bottom line. Because if half the paragraph is gone, I can't help. I mean, if it's not there, I don't know what you're doing.
Thank you. And I'm just there was a question that came in earlier about cutting and pasting. Yes or no? And I'll say, I think that Jackie just answered the question about, in order to add spice, it's hard to cut and paste and add spice. So what you're wanting to do is tailor your proposals, even if you are, using your same mission statements over and over, add spice. It's each grant maker is unique. And so you want to tailor your proposals. Jeff. So we're talking about any don't do's or common mistakes you may be.
And so I'm going to frame it in the form of do's and do more of.
Okay, thank you.
We live in an interdependent world. So I always appreciate when folks are sharing with us their interdependencies and how they're collaborating with one another. None of us are out on an island. None of us are the Lone Ranger. None of us have a magic sauce here. We're all doing important things, but it only matters if all of it's happening, right? So what is that interdependence? What is that collaboration? And really then figuring out and sharing how you're doing your work with your community. If we're just doing things to people or for people, we're actually not building any new capacity. Only in working with people are we building new capacity and helping people to lead healthier and more prosperous lives. So that always comes back to me in terms of what co-creation is occurring here. What work are we doing with one another to make things better, not just tomorrow, but a week from now, a month from now, a year from now.
Thank you. And finally, Mark.
Not a whole lot I can add to that. Jacquelyn and Jeff did a really nice job of putting it succinctly. I would say that I just want to remind people that, remember at the beginning, Jacquelyn said research, research, research. Mm-hmm. Along with that, what the next thing that came about in the conversation was communication. Mm-hmm. Communicate with the grantor, ask them how to put it together, ask them what they want. And then from those two things, then do it. Put it together as it's requested, with some of their ideas, or at least consideration to the ideas that you gain from them. If you show that you've incorporated the things that you've learned and that you're stretching your mind and learning more as you go along, that goes a long ways in showing that you've really got some initiative behind your efforts. So that's all I have to add, please.
Thank you. It's a perfect final note to end on. I want to thank all of you, Jackie, Jeff, Mark, all of you for your insight and what you shared today, and the thoughtful way that you answered the questions. I really appreciate that. We've been doing this for a while, and each time it's so rich, and I will definitely be watching this one again. You guys gave some wonderful gems, so thank you for that. I want to thank all of you, the viewers. Thank you for being here yet again for another Meet the Grantmaker panel. Thank you for your questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but we deeply appreciate appreciate your time being here and for submitting them. I hope you'll join us at our next one, which will be July 12th. So save the date. You'll get an email reminder for that. And lastly, of course, I want to thank our partners, Foundant Technologies and Grant Station. We're the Grantsmanship Center, and we appreciate you for being here, and we look forward to more conversations in the future. Have a beautiful day, everyone.